Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. Last month, the U.S. Justice Department released its crime statistics for 2006. The FBI reports a 1.3% increase in violent crime across the United States, and Arkansas did not escape the trend. In recent weeks, we have endured reports of homicides across the state, but where do we stand compared to the rest of the nation, and what are we doing to keep our communities as safe as they can be? Joining us tonight are some individuals with firsthand experience in dealing with violent crime and its aftermath. Dr. Karen Forrest is an associate professor of pediatrics at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences and serves on the Team for Children at Risk at Arkansas Children's Hospital. Judge Willard Proctor of Pulaski County Circuit Court's 5th Division. Steve Navoychek is Youth Services Administrator for the City of North Little Rock. Dr. Albert Cottrell, Medical Director of the Arkansas State Hospital, and Dwayne Yarborough, Education Specialist with the Arkansas Attorney General's Office. In our studios tonight, citizens from across the state who will be sharing their concerns on the issue. Also with us tonight, Pamela Smith, who will take their questions. And we would note also that you can join us from your home tonight by calling 501-852-8426. The gentlest of caveats, it is not a toll-free number. But with that, we will begin, and as we noted, the headlines are frightening. It seems that we have only to look at the evening news or to consult the morning paper to read horrendous details. Only this morning in the statewide daily, the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, was word of the plea and arraignment this morning of a 17-year-old youth charged with felony murder, and in the same story, references to a killing last week in the southern part of Little Rock in which the defendants are 17 and 15. Steve Navoychek, you've had a lot of experience dealing with youth and crime and have made, I think if I may say so, a reputation on it. Are we seeing a resurgence of what tormented Central Arkansas a decade ago?
The ingredients for the perfect storm are certainly there. I don't think we will ever reach the numbers or the magnitude of the problem we had in the early 90s because the community is more aware of it. What I think has happened over the years is a lot of the intervention and prevention programs that were put in place in the middle 90s have been defunded or gone away, or they're not being attended to like they were in the middle 90s, and we're beginning to see what's happened now because of that. Gangs never really went away. They just sort of changed their dynamics, and we are beginning to see more activity on the street that is gang-like. But like I said, I don't think it's ever going to get like we had in the early 90s.
Your Honor, you're nodding in agreement. Some of these, not these particular young people to whom I alluded, but others like them come before your court and your colleagues on the bench on a frighteningly regular basis.
That's correct. Yeah, we do see that a whole lot. And I think that part of the problem is, as Steve said, that there's been a funding gap, and we don't spend as much money on prevention and intervention as we need to. And I think as a result of that, a lot of the money that we do spend on some of the other areas has resulted in really money not being available to do some things, because I think that really the key to our problems in terms of solving them is not to try to build more and more jails, because you'll never ever be able to build enough jails to solve the crime problem. But I think it's a combination. You've got to be able to have the stick of a jail, but you also need carrots and different programs and incentives to keep people from committing crimes.
Dr. Forrest, we're dealing with these youngsters. What's driving this? Is there a common denominator in this youth violence?
I wish there was just a single thing to address, because then we could focus everything on one single thing and I think have a big impact on prevention. The prevention difficulties as far as funding goes are definitely a problem, because we're going to pay for crime and violence as a society if we don't put into the prevention part. And there's been studies that show if you really fund good prevention, you actually save money as a society in the long run. I think the things that we see in a child abuse arena are multifactorial. You have domestic violence that's mixed in with substance abuse in a family. You may have some mental illness with the caregivers, and all those things, to steal the phrase, can sometimes be a perfect storm for a child ending up being in a situation where they become the victim of abuse or neglect.
Have we always had this incubation mechanism for youth violence, or does it seem to you to be, or anyone else on the panel, does it seem to be a little bit more egregious these days, or are you seeing it more often?
I think, again, we see that there's not a lot of funding being put into the things that can strengthen families before the problem gets to a point that someone either becomes a victim or becomes a victimizer. We have programs out there that we know could work, but it's hard to convince some people sometimes to invest on the front end because it takes a little bit of time to see the payoff. But so for right now, it seems like we're paying more at the end part of things. And that would be a good shift to try to get a little bit further upstream and try to make families healthier before we get to the problems that we're dealing with now.
I think the economy plays into it too, Steve. If you got people, you know, you got $3 a gallon gas, there's people that can't afford $3 a gallon gas, and they still have to get around. And I think that when you have not a lot of good jobs available, and when you have people who aren't making a lot of money, I mean, the economy is directly tied to it, as is illiteracy. I mean, I think we've got huge issues that the community has to understand, that the huge gaps that we have in a lot of the communities and the education that's offered to a lot of the kids, that really plays into it. It's amazing to me how many young people, even to this day, can't read and write up to the level that their peers in their same grade level. And that all plays into what we're seeing on the street again, this rise of juvenile crime.
Yeah, doctor, do you see, is there a particular pathology at work here, or is it just as obvious as what we think it is? Just frustration, lack of opportunity?
Yeah, I think the latter is probably true. You know, opportunity, poor education, substance abuse, poor parenting, those factors come into play. I think that's a real big part of it.
Dwayne?
I have to agree with what Steve and said earlier with regards to the economy and illiteracy. Education is a primary, it's a key element in helping young people better understand that they do have a future. Education will kind of tender the, I guess, hopelessness that I think so many young people feel, which causes them sometimes to lose confidence in themselves, which makes them vulnerable to these elements that we speak of.
I tell people frequently at the 5-H Club, many of these kids are in there helpless, hopeless, homeless, hungry, and hugless. When you have kids in that sort of environment that are seeking these things that families give to them, and that drives a lot of kids to the gangs, posses, cliques, and crews on the street where they feel like they're going to get that. So we just have to make it. In North Little Rock, we preach over and over to beat gangs. We're going to compete with them. We're going to understand what it is that they do, why kids are so attracted to them, and we're going to offer them those things in other places. And the entire community has to be involved in that.
Well, what is the attraction there? I mean, comfort, community, succor?
Well, I think there are a number of elements, and when you speak with young people, they'll tell you that one of the primary focuses for luring them into that lifestyle is that it's cool. And I think now in Pulaski County, we're seeing also family tradition. And I think those two components play a major, major role in the luring. But most kids also seek belonging, acceptance, respect, money. I've even had young people talk about love for discipline. Ironically, what Dr. Foss was saying, I think our community is more reactive than proactive. And sometimes in that vein of speaking, being reactive, we wait, and allow this sore to fester, if you will. And wherein we should be jumping in on the front end and saying, hey, we can provide those things too. Maybe starting at home, then making sure they get it when they leave the home to go to school, and in the community.
It's a holistic thing too. He said at home, that's definitely the case. I tell people frequently when I travel that it's like dipping your dog for fleas in the summer. If you treat your dog for fleas, you put all that $30 medicine on them. If you don't treat where they sleep, they go home and get fleas all over them again. Exactly. So that analogy is something that people can really grasp on. It makes you understand that we just can't keep pounding these, putting the flea dip on these kids. We have to also reach out into the community as a whole and make people understand that there are things that we can do for you if you want to help yourself.
Dwayne Yarborough said a moment ago that we have to convince these youngsters that they do have some. Well, let me back up even before that, if I may. Obviously, not every poor kid in a poor neighborhood who struggles with adults with very poor parenting skills, or a single parent household, or a household in which the parent or parents may have substance abuse problems. Not all of them commit violent crimes. Some don't commit any crime at all. Some are able to break free. What's the difference? Can you point to it?
It's just a choice. that they have to make, but they have to be given those choices. I mean, they have to understand the difference between right and wrong, and that means teaching them at a very early age.
Well, it's also important to know there's a lot we don't know. A lot of times you'll have kids and they seem to come from perfect families, but yet they find that they're in the system when they're stuck in a violent system. So in some cases we just don't really know why certain kids resort to violence.
Well, I personally think that it's a matter or a level of understanding too that young people need to feel confident in themselves. And if they don't have that, whether it's about respect or acceptance or belonging or any of the other lures, if they don't have the confidence in themselves, they become vulnerable. They become vulnerable to start seeking it out in different ways. It doesn't matter, you know, this lifestyle doesn't have any barriers. It doesn't bother with race. It doesn't bother with gender. You know, it doesn't have those types of barriers. So young people kids are kids, let me put it like that, and they are in desperate need of the village to help raise them.
Yarbrough said a moment ago, we have to persuade young folks, particularly those at risk, well, I guess all kids, that they have hope, that they do have a future. That future doesn't look terribly bright to them. So, I mean, so how do you go about taking a young kid who has so many strikes against him at the age of, well, at birth, and then 5 and 6, and seemingly insurmountable social obstacles? How do you go about reaching out to that youngster and say, wait a minute, it doesn't have to be this way?
Well, if I may, I think one of the things we have to do is readdress how we are trying to reach these young people. We can't be afraid to change our curriculums. We can't be afraid to go out and integrate with them to help them integrate into the society that we're trying to teach them to live in.
You know, one of the is right here in Conway where we are. One of the best things in the world that I've ever come across is a little bookcase project that was started by Jim Davidson here, who is a columnist, a national columnist, and the members of his line and some other people in the community got together. They built 50 bookcases. They put those 50 bookcases into the homes of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds that were in the Head Start program, and they give them a beginning book. So at the very, you know, you got a 3-year-old kid that in the very beginning is beginning to realize, hey, there is other things available to us, and that took the community reaching out. And that's what I've said for years and years, Steve. I remember you spent the night with me in the car out with a bunch of Crips, and I told you back then that we've got to reach out and we've got to make young people understand that they don't need to create their own societies. We need to pull them into our society, and that means reaching out, letting them know that there are people in the community that care. And that sometimes is just a simple little thing, giving them a book and being with them while they read that book. Dr. Forrest was telling me she's a mentor with one of the programs that works in our community in North Little Rock, and that mentoring is so important, so important.
So if you consider how youth and young adults make decisions, they pretty much feel like they're invincible. So it's hard to tell somebody, if you do that, there's going to be a bad consequence, because youth and young adults don't tend to think about the consequence necessarily of their action, even though we see that as their consequence. So all these touch points that we've talked about, as far as touching their self-esteem so that they do feel hope for their future, touching their families so that their families feel empowered to be able to help them even though they may have limitations, and the different places in the community where they can get touched as far as Boys and Girls Clubs or places like that. There's just any place to be able to try to build up that self-esteem and that hope is going to help them make a decision instead of just telling them yes or no, don't do that.
Yeah, Judge?
And even beyond that, I think that after we get to a point where we see that people don't have an opportunity, or it looks like things are going to be really just bleak and bad, I think that we as a society have an obligation to make programs and things available to people beyond the normal realm of family and things of that nature. Like, for instance, when I see people, for the most part, it's after they've gone through all the processes that everyone else has seen them through. I mean, I see them pretty much at the end stage. And so
when everything else has failed.
Everything else has failed, and so here I am, and I've got to make a decision as to what to do. And I think it's important for us to understand that even after all those things, that we don't throw them away and think that everything is hopeless, that we still have the ability to take the time that we have with them and go back and reinstill some of the same sorts of things that they're talking about. Because it's amazing, listening to them, the same sorts of things I'm seeing are the things that people really want. They need. They need discipline, they need structure, they need an opportunity to understand what it is that they can contribute to society, why it's important, a sense of hope, a sense of accomplishments. All those things help in terms of dealing with adults that are broken when they come in our courts. So I think that it's really important for us, not just as a society, to take this holistic approach, not just to say that we're going to stop just with the young people at a certain age, but I think we've got to say that, look, let's face it, we may have failed with a certain number of people. Those people are going to come up to this level, and so we've got to have things in place to make sure that they too are able to connect back to some of the different programs and ideas that have been talked about so far.
Criminal court judges don't deal with success stories.
Unfortunately, yeah.
And one of the other things that we have to try and figure out, we have to make young people and adults understand that as long as they want to help themselves, we will help you. But so many of them don't want to help themselves, and it's difficult for people who are in intervention and prevention to finally admit, hey, we failed with this one, we're going to have to move on to the next one, because that kid never grasped the concept that if I really want this help, it's here for me. And so many of them don't seem to want the help, and we waste a lot of time on those kids.
I think, though, what makes us successful, though, as a society and a community is the fact that we actually make the help available. And I think that's our obligation. I think that even if, the whole saying, you can't make them drink at the water if you take the horse there, but the fact is that you got to have water at least for them to be able to drink from. And I think that that's our obligation. And all we can do is provide the tools, and sometimes we can provide the incentives for them maybe to take advantage of the tools. But I think we've got to make sure that we have the tools available for them to be able to take access of.
We want to pause in our conversation for just a moment to bring you the story of a woman who lost both her sons to violence. She's taken it upon herself to educate others about the tragedy of violent behavior, and to do so in a fairly unusual manner.
Both of my sons were murdered. Marcus was killed on April the 23rd of 2005. And his death was an accident. Two guys were shooting at one another, and somehow Marcus caught the bullet.
Marcus Cooper, affectionately referred to as Little Coop, was the youngest, just 21 years old. 11 months later, his brother, 25-year-old Cortez Mallet, Zena Cooper's oldest son, gunned down.
Of course, I knew I wasn't the first mother that had had a child to be murdered, and I knew I wouldn't be the last one. But my heart was just so saddened about the endless of our black males constantly getting murdered, and plus we're killing one another,
But the personal nightmare lingers for Zena Cooper. After losing the son she describes as full of personality and affection.
I wake up through the night. I take sleep pills to help me sleep.
While some nights may be restless, her days are quite busy. To preserve her son's memory and to spare other families a similar tragedy, Cooper has taken on a mission that comes under the guise of an ice cream truck, delivering kids a frozen treat along with a scoop of something else.
They call me the ice cream lady. And a lot of them call me Miss Pac-Man or Miss Little Coop or Miss Coop. And they respect me highly because they know what I do, who I represent.
On this date, she's visiting kids in a summer outreach program called Our Club at the Watershed in Little Rock.
Both of my sons are in a grave due to hanging around with the wrong people. Children, listen to your mothers, please.
Her daughters, granddaughter, who is Marcus's child, other relatives, church members, and family friends travel with her.
We lived next door to each other. When our kids were growing up, I had 2 kids and she had 2 at the time. And we were both single parents raising our kids, and we helped each other out.
And she's inspiring a whole new generation.
The spirit of your children would never die as long as you continue to love someone else and doing what you're doing here. It's going to be a success.
Even though Cooper may appear a tower of strength, she says sometimes are more difficult than others.
Yes, it hurt. It feel like somebody standing in my heart with steel-toe boots on some nights. I yearn for my son's hugs.
And as much as she's reaching out to other kids, they are also giving something back to her.
You see how the little boy come up and gave me a hug? I don't know him. But in this type of business, I get hugs all the time from little boys, and that's what I miss. So God fills voids, every day. My girls can tell you every day my boys would come in and give me a hug. I love you, Mama.
And the girls, 13-year-old Walisha Tidwell and 15-year-old Natanya Munn, saying they're also trying to be strong for their mother while coping with the loss of their big brothers.
They would take us out for our birthday, and they'll say funny things like stay crazy and stay sweet and all that, and make Mama proud, go to school, do what you're supposed to do.
As for the suspects convicted in the young men's deaths, Marcus Cooper's killer was arrested the same night of his shooting.
He got 5-year probation for carrying a gun because he was shooting in self-defense. But he did call me after being locked up for 59 days and told me, Miss Zena never did intend for anything like that to happen. And I told him, young man, I've been praying for you, because I really had.
In Mallett's death, one suspect has already been sentenced to 45 years. Another goes on trial August 28th. Yet Cooper has found the courage to forgive.
I'm not angry at neither one of the gentlemen that killed my son, but I just pray that if they did know God, that now that they've taken a life, that they will get to know God.
The untimely deaths also sparking change in a young relative who now volunteers on the ice cream truck.
Well, my grandson is working on it, and he's 10 and a half, or 11 and a half. He's had a behavior problem, and working with the kids has kind of toned him down. Losing his cousins has shown him that there is another way to go.
And Zena Cooper says whether it's in the family or not.
I mean, all I want to do is help some kid. If I can help save someone.
Two lives ended. I want to go back to something that Mr. Yarborough said a second ago, and what we've all touched on. You said we can't be afraid to change the curriculum in our schools. Now, for rather a long time, I think some time ago, self-esteem was a big part of the curriculum in schools. That was really directed particularly at disadvantaged kids. And there seemed to be a backlash against that. I mean, it was dismissed with a sneer as being unworthy of a public school education. And one gathers that it was dismissed or at least eased out of the curriculum, perhaps in favor of more science and math, whatever. A mistake? First of all, did that happen?
I think you're right, Steve. I think and at that time period, I think we were all grasping for answers on how to deal with the problems at hand. And when someone said, well, maybe we should try to enhance their self-esteem. So they came up with these quick fix ideas. And unfortunately, as you heard Dr. Foss say, we can't, it can't be repaired overnight. And so when these programs didn't seem to be taking hold, they were then kind of, the money started, people with the money started saying, hey, we don't invest in this anymore. I don't know if it was with a sneer, but I know that when you lose your funding and you can't put these programs
I do. I mean,
in.
it was sneered at widely, broadly. I mean, there was a lot of criticism as feel-good, quote, feel-good type stuff that shouldn't be in a public school system.
Yeah, well, I think, again, we're talking about, are we willing to invest in the long term? Because you may not see immediate gains, by the end of the week. It may be something that may not take place for a decade. But at the risk of losing our young people, we have to make that executive decision. Where are we going to invest our money? Are we going to continue to build, as you heard Judge Proctor say, we're going to continue to build prisons, create space. We'll never make up enough bed space for crime. Are we going to try and invest on something that we can build on for the next generation?
Doctor, this whole notion of feeling good about oneself, or this self-esteem, do we undervalue that? Have we?
Well, I think we have to some degree. It's a tough concept, I think, for a lot of people to get their minds around. It's an important part of a child's development. If you don't have it, I think it puts you at risk. And I think the one thing that psychiatry can add, we can identify risk factors. If you have this problem or this problem, if you don't do this, that puts you at risk for certain things. And that's certainly true with violence as well. Poor parenting, chaotic environment, substance abuse, prior history of violence, all those are risk factors for future violence.
All right, over to Pam Smith now. Question from our audience. Pam?
Hi, Steve. We do have a question from Carly Crisp, who is from Conway. It's a great opportunity to
engage in some very important dialogue, particularly in light of all of the things that we've been hearing about in the headlines recently. So what is your question, Carly?
I would like to possibly elaborate on a subject that was brought up earlier about where we talk to the kids in the schools and then they go home and the problem still remains. I was just wondering if there were any programs that are in effect now that are helping out with that particular aspect of the issue and what they are and what that entails.
Okay, thanks, Carly.
Okay, was that directed to me? Okay, well, I mean, Attorney General McDaniel has made it quite obvious with his platform that he intends to do a lot of work with trying to help young people better understand their future. And we have several prevention and education programs that we offer, one being the Smart Choices Law Education Program, where we break down Arkansas's criminal justice system, and our emphasis is juvenile law. Also with our internet safety program, we're trying to educate young people on the dangers that exist, as well as adults. And both, and all of our prevention and education programs are targeted for youth, but we have an adult component where, I mean, we feel like if we're not teaching the adults, it won't do any good to teach the young people. But as far as are they taking that information home, we would like to believe that they are, but again, I think Judge Proctor said it's a holistic approach. So we have to be, I guess, more aggressive in helping, as Steve said, cure the problem of the fleas at home. Mm-hmm. And I can't say that our programs have any recourse for what takes place after the young people leave our environment.
We've got a program in North Little Rock. It's actually run by somebody you know, LaFell Jackson, who was one of the original Gangster Crips years ago. And one of the things he does, it's an after-school program, but one of the things he does before those kids can participate in his program, and they all love his program, is he requires the parent to give back a couple of hours a week to the program. Mm-hmm. They are required to come down and either read to the kids or help clean up or whatever it is they can do. But if the parent doesn't participate, the child goes home. And LaFell says it's only taken a couple of times when that kid comes dragging a parent back in, saying, look, we're going to come back, Mama, you're going to do what we're supposed to do here. So we do realize that we are reaching out to some of those homes and letting them know that if they want help, help's available.
Dr. Forrest?
Now, I think just from a pediatrician standpoint, a lot of times we'll see kids brought into clinics either by the parents or referred in from the schools for behavior that's out of control. And a lot of times when you delve into that, it's because there's really not a structure at home, and that's because the parents weren't really parented with anything they can model after. So just thinking about just even parenting classes for parents in those types of situations, like Centers for Youth and Family has it, Arkansas Children's Hospital has a parenting class. Those types of things, I think, are things that could be helpful as well.
I mean, not amateur psychology, but back when I was doing a lot of reporting on it about 10 years ago, I had a number of people in the in the medical and the social sciences field, services field, tell me, point out that young people want strokes. They want comfort. They want to be told they matter, and they're going to get it. They're going to find it somewhere, some way. So when I heard the lady in the presentation say, and you hear it said elsewhere, well, the young person, young man, young woman was hanging with the wrong crowd. Mm-hmm. Well, they chose that crowd. Or did they? Or are they left to that crowd?
Well, actually, Steve, I think that those lures that we talked about, acceptance, belonging, love, respect, family, discipline, those are all elements that every young person is asking for. We all need it. We all wanted that. We're no different from them. The difference is the choices we made. That are, to say to a young person, hey, look, we know you're in need of love, but we have to be able to provide it. If we don't, we're asking them to go out and find it. So to answer your question, they made the choice, sure, to go out there, but they were in search of the basic needs. Love, respect, belonging, acceptance, all of those same lures.
And yet I'm hearing, though, from all of you on the panel that in recent years, the choices we have provided these youngsters has narrowed.
Oh, yeah.
Been dwindling. You're right.
Oh,
it's been
definitely.
The options are fewer.
Yes.
Back to Pamela Smith, who is with a young person who has a particular interest in youth violence. Pamela?
Hi again, Steve. You're exactly right. We are joined now by Miss Arkansas 2007, the very lovely Katie Bailey. First of all, congratulations to you. Talk about your platform, because you have decided to take on this very weighty issue of violence prevention in the schools?
I have. I've focused my efforts for the last 10 years towards school violence prevention and working with young people, administrators, school officials, community leaders to equip them with the skills necessary to know how to handle their problems before things escalate to violence, and also so that parents and teachers know the warning signs. Oftentimes they don't know the warning signs, and so many times the children possess them and it tends to go overlooked. And bullying has become a huge problem in our society today, and as they've all mentioned, it's so important that our young people feel loved, that they know that they have a valuable role in society and to be productive members of the community. And so on a daily basis I have the opportunity to spread the word of hope and encourage them to set goals and to challenge themselves daily. One thing that we have heard consistently is not enough funding, and my goal is to show all of the schools throughout the state of Arkansas, across the United States, that school violence program costs little to no funding. It's an easy way to solve the problem, and certainly something that we should all become involved with.
Well, that's wonderful. Talk a little bit, Katie, if you will, about why this is so important to you personally.
I'm originally from Jonesboro, Arkansas, and I can remember hearing about the shooting at Westside and feeling absolutely frightened. Oftentimes you hear of these events taking place out of state, but when it's in your home, your hometown, it is a reality check for you. It was a reality check for me to realize that students were afraid to go to school. I was often scared to go to school, not knowing what if that happened at my school, what would we do? Would I know how to handle the situation? Would the community know what to do in the aftermath? And so that really was something that was close to home for me. My cousins are both teachers in the Jonesboro School District, and my cousins are all attendants in the Jonesboro School District. So that was a reason I chose that select critical issue.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us. And for folks who might want to have the lovely Katie Bailey visit their schools, what do they need to do?
The easiest way to do that is to contact the Miss Arkansas Business Office or to visit www.missarkansas.org for more information about me as well as my involvement in school violence prevention. And for more information regarding school violence and what you can do to take an active role, visit my website, which is Katie Bailey, KatieBailey.org.
Well, thank you very much, and we wish you well in your endeavor.
Thank you very much.
Back to you, Steve.
All right, Pamela, thanks very much. A call holding now, a viewer in Pulaski County. Go ahead, you're on the air.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. I was calling regarding, Steve, the programs that you mentioned that are available for our kids. I live in North Little Rock, and they, most of the community centers that offer the minimal cost programs, they fill up so quickly. And I see all these kids, like from 7, 8 on up, that have nothing else to do during the summer and during the school year. What are these programs for these youth that you keep mentioning? Because I don't see them. I see the kids hanging out. Where are they to go?
Well, you're right. There are some deficiencies. The Boys and Girls Club have some wonderful programs, and you can call our office at 340-5309, and we'll be happy to help direct you. But there are a lot of things available. A lot of people don't realize that things are available. But once again, we're back to the funding issue. A lot of the programs do fill up, and we just are strapped. We can't reach out to all the kids in the audience here. We've got Mike Newhoffel, who ran our Boys and Girls Club program in North Little Rock for a couple of years, and he can tell you the same thing. We try to reach out. We fill up. Kids leave. We bring more kids in. But it goes back to the thing once again that if we have a child who wants to help themselves, we will make things available. We will find a place to put them if they really need a place to go.
But it goes back to Judge Proctor's point, which yes, you have to have water, but you also have to have a horse that's willing to be. So you got to have both.
Yeah, it requires a mix.
Yeah,
and I would put a plea in just from a personal standpoint. I do volunteer with a mentor program in North Little Rock.
Would you tell us
what a great?
Let me interrupt, Doctor, if I can. I apologize for that. You mentor what do you do?
So during the school year, I meet one-on-one with a teen in the North Little Rock area. These are usually either from East Campus or West Campus. This is with the STEP program. So we meet as a group, but then we also break down and just have a one-on-one mentor time. And we talk about anything that's going on with school or just really just kind of get involved in their life. And I think we've talked a lot about kind of ideals, but it really takes an investment in a kid's life. It's not just meeting them for a brief amount of time, but when you really get to know them to the point that they'll trust you, because it took a long time for the person that I mentor to trust me to the point that she would talk to me about what's going on. And it takes a little bit of time to build that relationship, but we're talking about lack of services for kids that's a great way for the community to get involved, is make yourself available as a mentor, because we have a waiting list for kids trying to get into this mentor program.
I want to come back to that in just a moment. Back to Pam Smith.
We have another question for the panel tonight. This one is from Shelley Dockery, who is from Little Rock. Shelley.
Yes, earlier you mentioned the importance of a youth's self-esteem, and as Pamela mentioned, I'm from the city of Little Rock, and we work with the Summer Jobs Alliance program, to where we employ about 400 youth throughout the period of about 6 weeks over the summertime, at about 150 plus businesses throughout the city of Little Rock. And my question to the panel tonight is, what can we do to get businesses to see the importance of taking a youth on for those 6 weeks throughout the summertime, to teach them job learning skills, to teach them communication skills, to better our program?
Good question. Thank you.
Where's the private sector here?
Private sector, they need to step up to the plate. I mean, a community cannot, the government can't do this by itself. Schools can't do it by itself. Law enforcement, judges, this is a community, and everybody in the community has a role to play. I'll never forget back in the day, a realtor telling me that he lost like an $8 million sale in Little Rock of some huge industrial complex, because he picked the guy up at the airport, took him to this, was taken to this site, and on the way the guy asked him what the community was doing to deal with the gangs, and this was when Little Rock was in deep denial. And the guy said, "What gangs?" The realtor said, "What gangs?" And the guy said, "Take me back to the airport." He said, "I've been reading gang signs all the way on here, and I'm not going to bring people to work in a community that's not dealing with the issue." And so he said, he realized right then, the realtor, he said, well, the business community has to step up to the plate. And they really do. And we're lucky and blessed in North Little Rock. We've got a smaller city than Little Rock, but we have a very active Chamber of Commerce, and they do step up to the plate, and they support all of these programs. And I would encourage every other community to reach out to their business community and try to get them involved, because it's so critical.
And partnerships are essential. As a matter of fact, with our program, the only way that we're able to do things through partnerships. We partner with other entities in order to bring about some of the different programs. We have like health fairs, mental health fairs, job fairs, focus on the family, different things. But the only way that we're able to do those things is through the partnership that we have, as Steve was saying, we go to businesses, we ask them. The young lady asked the question, well, how do you get more people involved? One of the things that you have to do is just go and ask people, look, we need your help. And what we try to do is we let them know that, you're going to see them one way or the other. And it's easier to pay or be a part of a volunteer effort on the front end than it is to have to worry about dealing with them on the other end. And it kind of, one of the problems that we run into is it's a nightmare. It's hard to get people to mentor. We try to match mentors with people that have committed crimes. It's almost impossible. No one wants to be involved in that sort of thing, but we need people to step forth. And we've had some people to do that, but we really need people in the community to come in and partner. So we ask people, we've had little receptions where we've had people come in and tell people, destigmatize a lot of what people's notions are about what a probationer is, that they're not some sort of monster with the, with the desire to try to do something wrong to you. They just have an initial, they may have had a problem, a lapse in one area or another area of their life, and they need help in terms of getting back on track.
The mother who lost 2 sons to violence, you met her a moment ago on videotape in the report that we saw. She's with us in the studio now, Pam Smith.
Thanks again, Steve, and thank you very much, Ms. Cooper, for joining us tonight. Talk about why it was important for you to be here to share your story.
Well, first of all, I like to share with you all that I wanted everyone to know that people hear the side of the Gazette and the Democrat, and you hear the side of what people say, but I wanted to be here to give a mother's version of what my sons were. Cortez and Marcus, what they meant to me and who they were to me. People have a way of judging them from reading the paper, but I know who they were to me and what they was.
And this is very important too, I think, for you to be able to associate a face with the tragedy. And these are not just numbers or statistics, these are people's loved ones. Do you feel that if young people, perhaps who may be involved in crime, if they could think about the consequences, that this is somebody's mother, this is somebody's loved one, that they would maybe give pause and not do the things that they do?
Exactly. And also that it's not just nobody care about them, it's somebody's child. I mean, I love my sons. They were my sons. They wasn't just somebody or something that was just thrown away and forgotten about. I
Right.
mean, I carry that around with me. I will forever carry them around with me. It was like putting a part of me in the ground when I put my sons away, and I wanted it to be known, you know.
Well, we appreciate you sharing your story with us, but also you tell me that you've brought a couple of women, because you're, I guess, now mentoring 2 women who also
Yes.
lost their loved ones.
Yes.
They lost sons?
Yes.
And it's such a tragedy that we're seeing this violence, this cycle of violence, particularly affecting young men.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We appreciate your sharing with us, and perhaps we'll get to hear from the other ladies before the program is done. Steve?
All right, Pam Smith, thanks very much. Can I go back to Dr. Forrest? You mentioned earlier that you're mentoring to the extent that you can, that you're comfortable without violating any confidences, certainly the identity. Can you tell us how old this young lady, I assume, is?
She is.
And what does she talk to you about? When you have gained her confidence, what is she sharing with you? And do you have the sense that what she is sharing, in that sense, she's every young lady?
She's 16 now. We've been in a mentor relationship since she was 14. And really a lot of what we've talked about today are things that she has shared with about, you know, she wants more than anything to have love, acceptance, friendship, those types of things as well. And just, we talk about choices. We talk about boyfriend-girlfriend relationships. We talk about choices about behavior at school. There's bullying going on in the school. So really just everyday types of things.
Could you see this young lady that you're mentoring? It's fair to say that certainly before you began your relationship, that she was a youngster who could go either way?
Yes, I mean she's in a tough neighborhood, and I oftentimes try to put myself in her position and say, if I was growing up in that situation where she was growing up, what would my choices be? Because she doesn't really have a lot of good modeling to go off of, and she sees so much in her sphere of influence at school and on media now, and the things with the internet that are able to influence her. So she's very much someone that can make good choices or bad choices, and so that type of relationship of really just being able to talk to kids so they can talk through those types of things that they're seeing and try to help them filter and process that.
Is she frightened? Or is she overconfident?
With probably both with some things. I think in some things she does really see herself as invincible, and so we've talked through some of those things. But
She's
at
a
the
kid.
same time,
she
sees more in her neighborhood and sphere than I ever did at that age. And so in some ways, she just kind of takes that in and takes that in stride, where it's maybe a little bit even more shocking to me.
How much, you're busy, but how much of your time does this relationship take?
So we meet usually for an hour and a half or 2 hours. This is a faith-based mentor program, so we get together, do a Bible study, and then we break down and have our individual time. So it usually takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours a week.
A week.
Right. But then we'll get together and do some things outside of that as well. But it's not a huge investment in my time compared to what it is for where she is right now in her life.
Sure. Steve, let me come back to you in just a moment.
Okay.
We have a call holding from Pulaski County. Go ahead. You're on the air.
Hi, my name's Clayton Johnson. I'm the president of the Coalition of Little Rock Neighborhoods in Little Rock, and I want to thank Judge Proctor for being there tonight. He had him in last weekend to have a discussion with this matter, and I want to thank all the panelists for coming in on this. This is an issue that's very important to not only the Central Arkansas but the entire state of Arkansas. And I have 2 questions basically that I'm directing to the Judge Proctor and the panelists. And one is the continual frustration we have with the funding issue of PIT and prevention and intervention. And that is that, you know, as a free country and as an industrialized country, we are locking up more people than any of the other industrialized countries in the world. But our crime rate is continuing to rise. So that puts some discredit to the argument that we can lock them all up. Yet the funding for PIT continues to decline because it just stays stagnant with an inflation level that decreases funding every year. So how do these members argue with the leaders at our city and county level to justify funding more and more jail beds and more cells and less for PIT? And the second question is, it goes to the heart of the issue of the youth. The crime statistics in the state show that the programs between the 8 and 15-year-olds are working very, very well. But the at-risk groups are between 17 and 26. And what programs are they proposing? Because the 17 to 26 are the ones that are really committing many of these violent acts. So what programs are they prepared to engage with this at-risk group of individuals?
Could I modify that question? I'm wondering, though, the gentleman noted that probably much of the violent crime is committed by 17 to 26-year-olds, but are the seeds for that planted, though, at a younger age?
Younger, and I think that's why we're seeing that now, that the 17 and 26-year-olds, because in the last 8 or 9 years, the prevention and intervention programs have been dwindling, have been drying up. So I think naturally we're reaping what we've sown, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't mean to take issue with the gentleman who just called, but that occurred. And the other question, I think, Your Honor, was directed to you, and that's the
right. It's a great question, and I think it hits really at the heart of a lot of the problems. One thing that he brings out, which is really important, I mean, the reality is we've got to deal with these people. I mean, regardless of how they got here, they're here. And there really aren't a whole lot of things that are there to help to deal with them. And I mean, a lot of the county programs and a lot of the other cities, they have problems with priorities, and it's not, bad. These aren't bad people that are trying to make, bad decisions. These are people that are really grappling with some issues that are very difficult, and funding priorities are very difficult. It's difficult to fund a prevention intervention program when you know that the community is not going to be able to see immediate results of that program. As the doctor said, it's going to take time for these sorts of things to really show the benefit, and so that's a problem. And I think also when you have like a crime wave like we did recently, and everybody's just like harping on, let's do something, it's easy to come up with a solution like building more jails. What we've got to do, I think, is we've got to redefine and come up with a community as to what it is that we expect these programs to produce for us. What is the definition? What do we want? Well, how do we define success? And I think a lot of people say that success is defined whether or not a person commits another crime. But I don't think that's necessarily the definition of what success is in terms of a program. You have to look long term. Are they maybe did they do this one thing? Why did they do it? And after they did this one thing, have they done nothing else in their life? Have they really got it right now? I think that we've got to, as a community, look into what it is that we would accept in terms of failure rates, because there's no prevention intervention program that's going to be able to produce results immediately, and also prevention intervention programs aren't going to be able to have the sort of success rates that are going to bring in the funding that a lot of people want to have.
And the prevention and intervention people have to be just as loud as the suppression and enforcement people.
There you go.
The people who realize that prevention and intervention works, they have to be the ones calling the mayors. They have to be the ones calling the governors and letting them know, look, we think that you need to fund this, not just build jails, but unfortunately, it seems like in society, it's those people that are promoting jails and more force that have the loudest voice. And that's who the politicians react to.
All right, Pam Smith.
Steve, this is Harvell Howard of Conway. He has a question.
Yes, one of the panelists mentioned earlier about integrating the child's experience, whether it be impoverished, lower socioeconomic, or even violence, into their educational experience. I was wondering if this is taking place. I have a passion for literacy for all young people, but with an emphasis with young Black African American men. And I was just wondering if anything's taking place, where and how.
Okay, thank you.
Literacy programs. I mean, is that what you're asking about? Are there programs going on that have to do with literacy?
Well, literacy and educational experiences overall, whether it's mathematics, any way to help them improve their experience as a student, to let them know the importance of that.
We are making some focus changes, and we're tweaking some things in North Little Rock, and gearing, we're getting away from sports and we're getting away from athletics. We still use that as a hook many times, but we're doing more. We just had a wonderful meeting the other day with some folks who want to go into the Bering Cross area, and that's their entire goal, is education, computers, reading, those sorts of things. And so we're beginning to see sort of a sea change among those in the public that are trying to reach out and help. So there are things available.
I'd also like to add that the PARK program, Positive Attitudes Reaches Kids, Kareem Moody is the acting director there. They also do a lot of literacy programs and after-school and tutorial and mentoring programs as well.
All right, thank you for your question, and keep leading by great example.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to state for the record that there are some components, members of the political and law enforcement community, who have, in fact, been sounding the warning for a rather long time. Right. We can't keep building jails. I mean, this is dumb to just expect people to.
The Justice Policy Institute in Washington, D.C. just released a wonderful study, and people get it on my website, which is gangwar.com, GANGWAR.com, and it clearly states that we've lost sight. What we've been doing over the last several years is not working, just building jails and suppression and cops with bigger guns. They're important because, frankly, there are some people that will kill you just because of the way you look at them. So we have to deal with those because, like the gentleman said, the 17 to 26-year-old, it seems like we failed for the last several years, and now we have to sort of reinvent what we were doing and get back doing it. And I want to touch on something that the doctor said. We talked a little bit beforehand. I recently read a study that in Los Angeles, in the school district there, 38% of the children in the Los Angeles school district suffer from PTSD. 38%, nearly 4 out of 10 kids in the classroom suffer from PTSD because of the environment that they live in.
You better PTSD.
What did I say?
No, you better
define it. Post-traumatic.
Post-traumatic.
Well, that's her bailiwick. She can talk about it, but she agreed with that. And one more thing, she talked about mentoring. I want to tell you, we're the only city in the state that has a police athletic league. And they recently did a study. They recently did a sort of a questionnaire among the kids. Among the girls, you know what the number one class they wanted? Knitting. These young girls want to learn how to knit. Now that opens up a whole new niche market for us because there are a whole bunch of people out there that knit that can give back a little bit to our community by volunteering and coming teaching these kids how to knit. I mean, that was an unbelievable thing for me to hear that the girls want to learn knitting. Who would have thunk it?
All right, Pam Smith.
All right, we're joined now, if I can get my mic way up here, by Michael Neuhoff, who is the executive director of the Boys and Girls Club here in Faulkner County. Talk a little bit. Well, you said you had a comment, but very quickly talk about some of your prevention areas that you guys have working
We
here.
have had some wonderful prevention programs in the past, the Smart Girls, Smart Moves programs that typically will address the alcohol and drug abuse and preteen sex. It's been successful with funding, that programs that are funded with sustainability in mind can be successful. The proof positive is the teen pregnancy rate is at one of the all-time lows in recent history. But the misconception in my comment to the panel is the community at large feels that the government funds a program, or businesses fund a program, when in reality the majority of our funding come from individuals, much like yourself out there watching tonight, that have a caring for kids. That's where the money comes from. It's from those people as a group of individuals that fund programs, not the government, not business. So we as a community have to act more together and to fund programs for our kids, because as the government goes and expands, the people that have the loudest wheels get the squeaky wheel, get the funding. For instance, drug wars. $500 billion has been spent on the drug war for the drug itself, but it hasn't funded programs to address why people use drugs. So we have to look at it in much bigger scale. The government funds us well. Those things cut back. Businesses fund us, but those cut back. But individuals support us the most. So it is up to us as individuals to step forward and fund these programs.
And we have to get away from that mindset of it's not my problem.
That's right. That's right. It's everybody's problem. All kids are at risk nowadays. And we, as the Boys and Girls Club, enable and inspire all kids. But the ones that need us the most is what we're there for. And that can be of all affluent to the poorest of the poor. And again, every kid needs that support nowadays.
Right. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you.
Pam Smith, thanks very much. Now, if we have a consensus on the panel, as we seem to, that getting a handle, if that's the term, on this problem is going to require an interdisciplinary approach. Ultimately, this has to it has to be given voice through the political community. Ultimately, these are political decisions. How much public treasure, public resources, is going to be devoted to this, and to no small extent, how much. What's the rallying point for the private sector to step in?
Well, I'm going to say that it's a basic process, Steve. No chain is ever going to be any stronger than its weakest link, and this is a community issue. So it's going to take every element of the community to get involved, whether it be from political standpoint to our civic standpoint to our business standpoint to our parents, and we have to incorporate our young people as well and encourage them to encourage themselves to get better. So
and yet, though, that voice, Mr. Yarborough, often seems to be subsumed by the louder voice that says lock them up.
Well, another link in that chain is the media, so we have to utilize that one as well. One of the previous questions was, hey, how can we get the fact out that this was a successful program? Well, we have to do the same things you heard Steve say, we have to bark as loud as they do. If you're on the side that says we need more intervention, prevention, and education, then you have to bark as loud as those that say, hey, let's put them in the dark and shut the door on them.
And the problem with locking them up, in just about every case you get out, especially in the adult system, precious little treatments going on and intervention after they're locked up.
All right, with that, we're just simply out of time. Thanks to all of you on our panel, all of you in the studio audience for joining us tonight, and all of you at home for participating. On behalf of the Arkansas Educational Television Network, thank you and good night.